What's going on? My name is Psyche, and welcome back to Dead Cells. Today, I'm gonna play a build that I'm sure a lot of you have not even considered for a very long time, which is melee tactics. I know, I haven't heard that phrase since 2.1, considering that they changed a lot of the colors of weapons as a part of their build identity. But today I'm gonna be playing some of Valmont Whip, and for some reason it's one of those weapons that never got changed to brutality only when it's mainly used as a red item. That being said, I don't play melee tactics very often, and just in the current state of the game, it's not a very valid strategy, not to mention that it's also extremely risky, considering that tactics is usually all about ranged gameplay. But luckily this time I found the weapons I needed right from the beginning of the starting tubes, so I guess this time around you don't have to watch me actually trying to get the weapons in shops. But as you can see, even in the early game, it's very good if you can actually land the critical hit, which I think it definitely takes a bit of getting used to. But that's what I like about a lot of the weapons, is that they have a learning curve. One thing I've seen some people do if they got hit in the first biome is that they would just restart the run. While yes, you can probably get further in the run if you have a perfect streak, I don't think getting hit too much in the early game is too much of a big deal. Even if I got lowered to like 1% health, I would still try to keep going. You never know when you're gonna find some food to heal back up. This game is really all about adaptation. If you perform poorly in a single biome, it doesn't mean that you'll perform poorly in the other biomes too. And in the 30 kill door, I find the ice bow, which I don't use a lot. And it is one of those weapons that's getting buffed in the 2.4 patch. Speaking of which, this is gonna be the last of the runs that will be in version 2.2 of the game. In case you haven't noticed, I actually recorded this run all the way back in February. Now you might be wondering, well, why am I making it into a video now? Well, it's because I saved up a bunch of footage on my laptop featuring a variety of runs. It's just that I never gotten to it until now. And this is the last in line. Now, of course, during March, you got 2.3 that came out, so I kind of just wanted to make more updated builds for those. As you might know, it's very popular to ride trends. If 2.3 has come out, I gotta make builds for 2.3 and make that a priority. But now that I'm running out of footage for different types of runs, I'm gonna wait till 2.4 comes out so I can make updated builds in the new meta. Speaking of 2.4, the beta version of it just came out today, and it has been confirmed from the devs that they will not be moving dual binding to custom mode, mainly because they couldn't figure out how to do it. But maybe they'll do it sometime in the future. But if you really wanted to dual bind something, you can probably just find some external third-party program to do it in. Though, obviously, I'm not a computer expert, I don't know how to do that, but I'm sure the option is out there if you just really wanted to dual bind. I have been testing some of the weapons out in the alpha patch of 2.4. I don't plan on making those runs into videos because it's just the alpha version. There's no way that it reflects the final form of the patch. But so far, I am really impressed by the amount of buffs and nerfs so far. I've definitely find a lot of the weapons to be a lot more viable now, including magic missiles and boomerang. In fact, I think boomerang might actually be the next meta breaker in 2.4. It's actually very good. If you haven't had the time to try it out, definitely do so. Boomerang was, I think, used to be very overpowered back when it came out. I believe that was during 1.2, which was the Rise of the Giant update. And back then, you could actually have two of the same weapons in your loadout. And if you had double boomerang, it was just really good. I'm actually really impressed that a lot of the buffs were actually done very substantially. I find that the Sonic Carbine as well as the magic missiles, they almost have their DPS doubled for their buff, which is pretty insane. I just kind of wish they told us that in the patch notes, so I don't actually have to go in-game to kind of compare everything before and after the updates. Looking back on my 2.4 reaction video, I kind of noticed that I was kind of overreacting on a lot of the changes, and mainly that's because it was just my first impression of looking at the patch notes on the website. I didn't actually go into the game and use the alpha patch to try out some of the weapons before. I just kind of rushed into it because I want to get the video out as quick as possible. Though I would be lying if I said I wasn't a little disappointed to find out that this update was not the crossover update for Curse of the Dead Gods. But it almost feels like the buffs and the nerfs are kind of a preview for something bigger. Hopefully in the next update, they'll actually do something a lot more substantial. I just find it to be really, really comedic that they buffed all 3 of the 2.3 weapons. Namely the Tombstone, the Oven Axe, as well as the Club. Maybe this will serve as a reminder that if you print slow weapons, it will just not be very good. Because if I'm gonna be honest, I'm not a fan of those items. One other thing I wanted to touch upon was dual binding. As you know, this is one of those changes that's very, very controversial. We've had these types of changes before. Namely, the removal of stats on items. I believe that was in 2.9, I could be wrong about that. They also reworked the economy, and then there was the malaise change in 2.1, as well as the difficulty change in 2.3. I think all of these changes sparked some degree of controversy among the community, and I think the removal of dual binding is very, very substantial. I actually see a lot of people arguing both sides. If you want my opinion, I think dual binding is not really a cheat strategy, but only to a certain extent. What do I mean by that? I mean, I don't think dual binding was the core of the problem. I think the problem was ice shards. Now, ice shards has been infamously changed in the history of Dead Cells. It used to have ammo, which was pretty much unusable, but now it doesn't. It was really, really popular that you could dual bind it with a slow melee weapon, and then you pick up the kill rhythm mutation, which made you attack a lot faster than you're supposed to. And it was just really, really busted. And the problem with these types of builds is that they're very one-dimensional. You pick up ice shards, you pick up any slow melee weapon, so broadsword, seismic strike, symmetrical lance, giant killer, and it's almost essentially the same type of gameplay with very little variation. And I would argue that these builds can't even be considered broadsword builds or sim lance builds. They're really just ice shard builds. I think ice shards goes against every sentiment of survival in the sense that it should be focused on slow and heavy hitting weapons. Ice shards is just way too fast, and a lot of the rework suggestions that I've seen so far was to make it pop slower, kind of like how the Beheaded charges up the Frost Blast attack before it comes out, but doing the same for ice shards, which I think can be helpful. Because if you're just trying to get the slowdown from ice shards, you can still do that. But maybe they would buff the damage to kind of compensate that it's a lot slower now. But anyways, they removed dual binding and they nerfed ice shards to the ground. I believe in the beta patch they nerfed it even further. I actually plan on doing a new tier list for version 2.4 of the game, and I actually think ice shards might go from S tier to D tier. All the way unplayable. Because the problem with ice shards is that it was so good it could basically replace any shield in the game. If you just slow down the enemy and then hit it a bunch of times, it just dies. There was absolutely no reason for a shield because you were just being too overly aggressive, and enemies will never even initiate an attack. And I think for this patch, shields will really start to rise again, because now ice shards is basically not very useful. And on top of that, they buffed a lot of the shields. I've been testing them out, and the greed shield as well as the knockback shield, they're a lot better now. And I cannot wait to find room for them in my builds. I am definitely excited about this change though, because I think ice shards needed to go. Though I'm not sure if this was the right way to go about it, considering it's basically borderline useless at this point. Speaking of which, I'm doing pretty good in this conjunctivious fight. I only took 1 point of damage, and this was going a lot better than I thought because I'm using Valmont's whip. But at this point, as you can see, my malaise bar is actually completely filled out, which does not happen very often. It's a good thing that they removed increasing enemy speed that you get from increasing malaise. Now that's no longer the case. Enemy attack speed will always be the exact same, no matter how much malaise you have, which I think is definitely good. So really, the malaise is really just there for intimidation purposes. And speaking of which, I'm actually going to release a malaise guide soon because I don't think I've seen one on YouTube so far. By the rate of how things are going, I actually expect 2.4 to come out pretty shortly. It wasn't like 2.1 or 2.3, where there was basically like a 1 month waiting period before it actually came out. It seems like it's mainly just buffs and nerfs, and it's just changes to the core game, so I don't imagine it's gonna take very long. I was really hoping for something a bit more substantial, in the sense that they would actually rework a lot of the weapons on how they functioned. They wanted to change the statistics of a lot of the weapons so that they do less or more damage, which is definitely cool, and I can see a lot of ways this can affect the meta. It's just that I would have liked something a bit more. But then again, Dead Cells has been going on for like 2 years now, and they're still updating the game, so I can definitely appreciate the work they have done. But the removal of dual binding is going to be pretty big for the next patch. It seems like the devs are actually confirming the fact that it is a cheat strategy. I understand that the game is intended to be difficult. There's a certain threshold that the game should be. You shouldn't have weapons that are so overpowered it makes the game trivial. I think despite the weapon that you use, the game should always have a certain level of difficulty, and I think that's what they're trying to do by removing dual binding. Now, dual binding has been an unintentional feature since the launch of the game. I'm surprised they didn't address this earlier, but there has been a lot of really creative builds that have been done from dual binding. I know one of them was the Boy's Axe plus barrel launcher. Like, that is very, very creative. I probably would have never thought of that. And I think dual binding in tactics is not really cheating, because you could probably just alternate the 2 buttons really fast and you could achieve similar results. It's just that dual binding removes the chore of doing that. Instead of pressing 2 buttons, you just have to press 1. Now, like I said before, I think the main problem of dual binding comes from survival builds, mainly ice shards, so part of me is glad that it's finally gone from the game, but a part of me is a little sad that a lot of the tactics builds will no longer be possible, including my most powerful build in the game video. According to some sources, they didn't actually nerf barb tips that much. I'm not sure if this was intentional, because barb tips should not be allowed to be in the game right now, at least in its current form. And I'm not sure how they're gonna nerf it. Moving onwards to the caverns. I know I've done this once before, but if you can actually get a high level Valmont's whip, you can actually one-shot the ground shakers. If you're wondering why I can't do that here, it's because the whip that I'm using right now is actually the whip that I got from the very beginning of the game. So I just never found one to replace it, which is kinda sad if you think about it. But then again, it really goes to show that even if you get weapons from the beginning of the game, it's still viable at this stage. And there I just kinda ignored that elite ground shaker because I didn't want to deal with that. The rationale for my skill setup is that I thought the magnetic grenade was really good at grouping enemies to a single spot, so it made it a lot easier for me to hit it with Valmont's whip. And then for ice armor, well, I just really like ice armor regardless of what color I'm playing. I think it can save you in a lot of tricky situations, and it definitely takes some getting used to, but if you can pull it off and actually manage your defenses, it's just so good, like S tier worthy of a skill. But other than that, I also noticed that I'm taking Crow's Foot for one of my mutations. This isn't the mutation that I pick very often, but I mainly use it in melee tactics because I think that it actually benefits you if you play tactics rather than ranged, because you can just roll all over the place and it would just slow down enemies. Plus, the slowdown actually helps with the timing of the Valmont's whip because it gets them into position. And as you can see here, taking a huge chunk of damage. That's one of the reasons why melee tactics is just really, really risky. It used to be viable before, it's just that a lot of the weapons that I guess the devs thought they didn't really resonate with tactics. I know Assassin's Dagger used to be tactics, as well as the Cursed Sword and Frantic Sword, which I think definitely can work. It's just that, again, playing melee tactics is just so risky, and things can go wrong very, very fast. And here I'm switching out Thunder Shield for the Ice Bow, because let's be real here, Ice Bow isn't really going to do much in this fight. But of course I get hit by the giant right away. That's just how things are. This fight is going to go on for a while because I kind of underestimated the amount that I need to actually distance myself to get the critical hits on the eyeball. I know it's definitely possible, it's just kind of difficult to do it. Plus I gotta dodge all of the giant's attacks. As you can see here, if I stand on the very edge of the fist, I can actually land critical hits with Valmont's whip. But thinking back on this run, I probably shouldn't have gone to Giant because it was just too much of a headache to pull off. I know it's been done before, so I guess I wanted to try it. But luckily I was able to get Giant down to half health. And on top of that, the fists are pretty easy to hit with Valmont's whip because they're such a big target. The only headache here is hitting the eyeball. But I think Valmont's Whip is one of those weapons that can be synergized with a lot of items. For example, you can do it with Spartan Sandals. I know some people said if you just kick an enemy, it just gets them right into position for Valmont's Whip. I've never tried that out myself, but I'm really excited to do it. I just thought that I haven't used Ice Bow in a lot of builds. I figured I might as well give it a shot, since if you freeze an enemy, then you can hit it pretty easily and get it into position. One other item you can do it with is the Boy's Axe, which roots an enemy and locks it in position so you can hit it with the Valmont's Whip. And this is what I like in terms of this weapon, is its flexibility. I don't like it if a weapon is one-dimensional in the sense that there is only one type of build it can fit in, such as crowbar. You really need the emergency door to make it work. If you don't have the door, then the crowbar isn't very good. Well, actually, the crowbar isn't very good in general. But I would say the crowbar is one of those weapons that is only good in one specific type of build. If you can use a weapon as both support as well as a main weapon, then it's gonna score high on my tier list. And here, fighting Hand of the King, I was really surprised I was able to pull off those parries with the single jab attacks. As you can see here, I used Magnetic Grenade, and it's very, very helpful with the bombs. All I have to do is throw it, and it's basically completely nullified. Not to mention it locks the boss in place so I can hit it with Valmont's Whip. Right now I'm gathering from some footage so I can make a all bosses guide, because so far I don't think I've seen a boss guide on the 5BC boss. And just like that, by the way, no-hit Hand of the King. That was I think that was my first no-hit this run so far. Can I hit the 5BC boss? Well, just wait and see. I haven't seen updated boss guides for a lot of the bosses in this game, at least in 2021. I'm not sure what's been changed these couple of years, but hopefully they're pretty accurate. A video like that though is gonna be a pain to pull off, but I'm sure I can get it out sometime this month. In fact, I'm probably sure that I'll be completing the rest of my Dead Cells guides this month, because let's be real here, I don't think I have a lot to go through anymore. You got the Malaise guide, you got the boss guide, and I might do one on how to parry. Some of you have suggested that I do updated versions on some of my older videos because I can commentate a bit better, and maybe I will someday, but the problem with that is that any type of guides is gonna take a pretty long time to do, at least longer than my usual showcase runs, such as this one. But I'm down 2 flask charges. I wanted to wait until I reached the food shop, but it was just way too risky and I didn't want to do it. But there, I finally find a level 12 Valmont's Whip. So going from level 4 to level 12, that is a very, very big upgrade. And immediately, you'll start to see the differences. That being said, you don't actually need the highest tier of items to succeed in a run. I'm sure if I didn't get it, I still would have played this run out just fine. And just like that, almost 2-shot the Elite Slammer, 1-shot the Elite Failed Experiment. That is the power of Valmont's Whip. I believe I did rate it as S tier on my tier list. While it's not the most powerful weapon in the game, it's just really fun to use. And it's really enjoyable to actually find items to work well with it. Because like I said before, there is a lot of items that can work with Valmont's Whip. But I'm almost at the end of this level. The Collector is one of those fights that will definitely take a bit longer than some of the other bosses. And it's most likely that in this fight, you will die to a war of attrition because the fight just lasts too long and you start to run out of resources. Collector's gonna suck out my cells. This point of the game, I kind of wish there was a use for cells. Maybe you get it into some kind of vat and it causes some cosmetic changes to the starting room or something. It just kind of feels bad that the Collector sucks out all your cells at the end if you've unlocked everything. I am also a bit sad that they're nerfing emergency triage. I'm not sure what was the reason behind this change. I don't think it's that busted in the game. Its main use is for endgame bosses such as Hand of the King as well as Collector. It's not really used in a lot of other scenarios. Even in the mid-game boss, not a lot of people do it because you're probably gonna have to swap back for another mutation once you go back to the biomes. So I don't think emergency triage was inherently busted. It just feels really weird that they would nerf it. And speaking of changes, they also buffed a lot of the items that I thought were already pretty viable, such as Frostbite. Again, I'm not sure what's the rationale behind this. They also buffed the Seda Stiletto, which in my opinion was already pretty good before. And I don't really understand why Seda Stiletto isn't a brutality only item, considering that a lot of its similar items have already been moved to brutality, such as Frantic Sword as well as Cursed Sword. But I'm gonna get teleported into the spinning ballroom, but luckily Collector just drank right away, so I didn't have to spend any more time in there. I think I've only gone to the triple spinning ballroom once, and that was in my big club video, the toothpick showcase run. And just like that, you see how useful ice armor was? It took a hit for me. If I got hit in this fight, I would have lost a lot of health because this is melee tactics. The shield is doing wonders for me here. The light beams that extend outwards is the one attack I kind of struggle with if I don't have a shield. So I'm very lucky that I have it here. But finally, I'm going to drink the Panacea. Do some parries one more time. Thunder Shield just very overpowered as usual, so it is getting nerfed in the next patch. But just like that, ending the run with the Valmont's Whip and another no-hit. So hopefully you've enjoyed this video. This will be the last of my 2.2 showcase runs, so I'm gonna wait till 2.4 comes out before I resume these types of videos. So hopefully you've enjoyed it. Thanks for watching guys, and I'll see you in the next patch.